Ukraine's president will be accompanied by European leaders as he heads to Washington for talks with Donald Trump. Volodymyr Zelenskyy will first meet with the US president before he's joined by the likes of Emmanuelle Macron, Giorgia Meloni, and Ursula von der Leyen. The talks come days after Donald Trump's high-stakes summit with Vladimir Putin in Alaska yielded a few results. In the run-up to today's meeting, Trump posted on Truth Social, putting the onus of ending the war squarely with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, writing he can end the war with Russia almost immediately. Now, for more on the view from Kyiv, here's Emmanuelle Chaze reporting.
It's been quite a roller coaster of emotions here in Ukraine because as the diplomatic events unfolded since Friday, since the summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska, and then the announcement of that visit of Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the White House, Ukrainians have not stopped experiencing war. There were still air raid alerts, there were still attacks all over the country while the future of the country was being discussed abroad. And there's a worry now ahead of this White House meeting, first off, that it's going to be a repeat of what happened in the Oval Office on the 28th of February, where Volodymyr Zelenskyy was in a sense, bullied by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and pressured into accepting any deal whatsoever to stop the war. And that would have been a deal favoring Russia. So there's very much a worry that this is going to happen again, even if there is relief. First, because EU leaders are backing up Volodymyr Zelenskyy by coming to Washington as well to meet Donald Trump, and also because the US has promised security guarantees for Ukraine this time around, with a little bit of a worry there as well, because in the past, Ukrainians had been promised security guarantees by its allies. And I'm thinking about the 1994 Budapest Memorandum that saw Ukraine giving up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for a promise of being protected should the country be attacked. We are decades after this agreement, and we've seen that since 2014, this hasn't prevented Russia from attacking Ukraine. So ahead of this meeting, Ukrainians are quite worried indeed.
Emmanuelle Chaze reporting there. We can now go across to our Brussels correspondent, Dave Keating. Dave, it seems like European leaders are essentially hand-holding Zelenskyy to Washington. What are they afraid of?
Well, the purpose of this is to basically give him backing. As Emmanuelle was just explaining, the fear is that you get another instance of the Oval Office ambush, as people called it at the time, where Zelenskyy was publicly berated by the US president and vice president. So it's to show support for Zelenskyy, but more specifically, they want to make sure that if Trump presents any new demands following his summit with Vladimir Putin on Friday that cross Ukraine's red lines, that the European leaders will be there to back him up. So before that Alaska summit, the European leaders and Zelenskyy had a conference call with Trump last Wednesday in which they laid out to him what would essentially not be acceptable to them. So they want to be there to repeat those red lines if Trump springs that on Zelenskyy today. The problem is, as you outlined there at the beginning, there is going to be a private meeting with President Trump and President Zelenskyy first before the European leaders are then allowed into the room. And as we understand it, there will even be a press pool with just Trump and Zelenskyy, maybe with others in the administration who are not so friendly to Zelenskyy. And so, of course, the fears of some kind of Oval Office ambush again are there. I think that the question here is one of credibility. Do the European leaders really have the stomach to go against Donald Trump if he really forces something on Vladimir Zelenskyy? If he says, if you don't accept a loss of territory, as he suggested in his Truth Social post overnight, the US is going to pull all support. Do the four European leaders who will be there, so President von der Leyen from the EU Commission, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and French President Emmanuel Macron, will they have the stomach in that room to say, no, Donald Trump, we will stand by Ukraine even if the US withdraws its support? That's very uncertain.
Because if you see statements coming from European leaders, I mean, just yesterday we had Emmanuel Macron who's saying he doesn't believe that Vladimir Putin wants peace. We had Ursula von der Leyen saying Ukraine's territorial integrity should be respected. Yet, as you pointed out to Trump's Truth Social post, he's saying NATO is effectively off the table. So can these two sides get on the same page here?
Yeah, essentially you have a total misalignment of motives here because Donald Trump just wants to end this war. Clearly, that's his main preoccupation. He is now consistently talking about wanting a Nobel Peace Prize for this even before he's actually done anything. And he clearly just views this as a headache that he wants to end, and Ukraine surrendering is the easiest way to end this war. For the Europeans, this is an existential question of security because the feeling in Europe is that if there is appeasement toward Vladimir Putin now, he will just be building his strength and he will eventually attack the European Union. So for the EU, this is not just let's get this over at any cost, which is the US perspective, the US government's perspective at the moment. This is really about something much, much deeper. And that's the problem here, because the US is the one propping up Ukraine's security, and the Europeans have not really been willing to say that they'll do that without the United States. And yet, for the Europeans, this is so much more important than for the United States. And so at that meeting today, I think this is really going to be on display, the central misalignment of motivations there, and the problem being that the parties to whom this is the most important are not willing to put on the line the courage and the guarantees that would be needed to actually support Ukraine if Donald Trump says at the end of today's meeting, okay, Zelensky, you won't accept what I've put on the table here, what I've conveyed to you as a message from Vladimir Putin. The United States is walking away. What will the Europeans do then? That's going to be a very interesting thing to watch tonight, if that is what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be one to watch that meeting for sure. Thank you very much for that, Dave Keating reporting there.